Excellency, former President of the Republic of Singapore, Mr. Saran, Professor Tan Tai Yong, Director, Institute of South Asian Studies, Ambassador K. Sivapani, Governor, Singapore International Foundation, and President, Singapore Indian Association. Mr. R. Dinagar, nominated Member of Parliament, Mr. Satpal Khattar, Board Member, Institute of South Asian Studies, Mr. Girija Pandey, Board Member, Institute of South Asian Studies, and distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. I bid you all a very good afternoon. On behalf of the Institute of South Asian Studies and the National University of Singapore, I warmly welcome you to this afternoon's Indian Elections 2014 Corporate Leaders Forum. To begin this afternoon session, I would like to invite Professor Tan Tai Yong, Director, Institute of South Asian Studies, to deliver his welcome address. Professor Tan.
Mr. Saran, former President of Singapore, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Institute of South Asian Studies, let me extend a very warm welcome to all of you to this afternoon's forum on the Indian general elections. Come Monday, 12th of May, India will have completed the largest elections the world has ever seen. Carried out in 9 phases over 5 weeks, an electorate of 814 million voters will decide whether the incumbent UPA government will return to power or a new government will be installed in New Delhi. All will be known on 16th May. This election is interesting on a number of counts. There are a huge number of first-time voters, about 100 million, voting for the first time. All parties have also made very extensive use of social media, Twitter, and other platforms to reach out to young voters. And from indications, voter turnout in many constituencies have been rather high, at least 10% above the participation rate in the 2018 elections. So what can we expect out of all this? If we go by the findings of the pollsters in India today, I think the outcome of the current election should already be clear. But as I speak to my friends, they tell me, hold on a minute, don't jump to conclusions yet. The Indian voter cherishes and values the secrecy of his ballot. He is likely to hold the ballot close to his chest. I mean this metaphorically, of course, because the elections is an electronic one, so it's a paperless poll. But the Indian voter is not likely to reveal what his or her vote is going to be. So my question is, are we sure that the Indian voter has really taken the pollsters into confidence about his or her vote? Or are we likely to be surprised by the ultimate outcome of the elections when the results are revealed? Well, the voter, of course, is not constitutionally or otherwise obliged to tell anybody how he or she intends to vote. And also we understand that there is a voter psychosis or fear of not wanting to be blamed or even suffer some form of retribution for the way he or she has voted. So all these elements suggest that the polls may not reveal quite accurately what the outcome of the election is likely to be. So this still gives, I guess, some political suspense and should add flavor to our deliberations this afternoon. Well, I have no intention of scoring the party of these posters and pundits to go by this prediction. We should also remind ourselves that pre-poll predictions have often gone wrong in the past. In 2004, Indian polls strongly predicted the victory for the BJP-led alliance, and in 2009, it underestimated Congress's winning margins. It would therefore be fascinating to hear our distinguished panelists share with us their thoughts on the poll predictions and, of course, the post-poll ways ahead. In exactly a week's time, we should know who will be or might be India's next Prime Minister. For the moment though, we are not there yet. So while we remain impressed by the Modi's way, we should not also be oblivious to the campaigns of the long-governing Congress, which is led by personalities from India's most conspicuous political dynasty. And this time around there has been the advent of a man called Arvind Kejriwal. How will he be judged? Is it by his brand of politics or by the brand of his administration? But for the present, I expect our panelists to reflect on what some people have come to see as the phenomenon of the common man's politics, at least expounded by the Aam Aadmi Party. So is this just going to be a subplot of this poll, or a mere sideshow, or indeed a game changer? I hope we will have a discussion about this today. While the final outcome of the elections might still be in question, one thing can be said, however, with a degree of certainty, and that is that whatever the outcome of the elections, there will be a change of guard at the helm of affairs in New Delhi. Even if the UPA were returned to power, there will be a new Prime Minister of India. Now these outcomes do not matter just to Indians, but we in Singapore, with our close relations to India, are also watching proceedings with much interest. Our researchers have been monitoring the lead up to the elections for several months, and in the past weeks have been offering their insights and perspectives through their publications and in the media and commenting on this momentous event. We decided to hold this forum now, as this is the time where the crystal ball should be less clouded than at the start of the campaign. Now, I should also add that sometime in June, the Institute will also be conducting a post-mortem and a review of the results of the elections, so watch this space. Now, we are delighted and honored to be joined by a distinguished panel of speakers this afternoon who will be speaking on various aspects of the elections. Now, to kick off today's proceedings, it is my pleasure to invite Mr. Shyam Saran, an old friend of ISAS, to give us an overview of the elections. Ambassador Shyam Saran is Chairman of the National Security Advisory Board under the National Security Council. He was former Foreign Secretary, and he's also Chairman of the Research and Information System, or RIS, for developing countries, an autonomous think tank in Delhi. He has had a long and distinguished career in the Foreign Service, served in many capitals in the world, and was ambassador, Indian ambassador to Myanmar, Indonesia, Nepal, and High Commissioner to Mauritius. Ambassador Saran is also the Indian co-chair of the India-ASEAN Eminent Persons Group, and he's a regular visitor to Singapore, and we always cherish and appreciated his views on India-Singapore relations. So without further ado, it's my pleasure now to invite Ambassador Saran to address us. Ambassador Saran, please.
Mr. Director Tan Tai Yong, thank you very much for that very generous and warm introduction. I would like to thank the Institute for South Asian Studies, its director and Ambassador who is unfortunately not here with us today, for inviting me to this high-level forum on the elections. I would also like to express my gratitude to President Nathan for finding time from his busy schedule to be with us this afternoon. As far as the forum is concerned, I could certainly say that the timing is right, catching the polling momentum at its very crest when 8 of the 9 phases have been completed. The last phase will be on May 12. And thanks to the use of electronic voting machines, an incredible 1,400,000, which are deployed in about 900,000 polling booths all over the country. The final results will be available on May 16, and if we are lucky, we will probably have a government in place by May 18. The post-election mood of anticipation, of course, cannot match the pre-election suspense that we savor at the moment. And entire tribes of pollsters, sephologists, and yes, astrologers as well, would by then have mostly slunk away in serial disgrace, though some, thanks to the laws of probability and nothing more, may have got a few of the sums right. So compliments on getting the timing right, and therefore people's attention. For this knowledgeable audience, it should not be necessary to spell out the breathtaking numbers that proud Indians love to read out whenever Indian elections are discussed. But yes, it is difficult for people to grasp that by May 16, we would probably have had an unprecedented 67 or maybe even 68% of an electorate of 814.5 million exercising their franchise, determining the fate of political aspirants in 543 constituencies, each representing an average of 300,000 voters. Just by way of comparison, and not to make you feel small, perish the thought, Singapore has 87 parliament seats with a voting electorate of 2.2 million. It is legitimate for people to ask, and this is frequently the case, that if India can repeatedly and successfully organize by far the largest electoral exercise in human history, why should it not achieve similar success in nation building? I wish it was so simple. India is usually very good at event management, even on a gigantic scale, such as Kumbh Mela, some of you may have heard of. But attention wanders on process management. It's like having the big fat Indian wedding, but the marriage itself may not turn out to be so exciting. On the other hand, it might be just mind if one gets up. I use this analogy to caution people in assessing post-election prospects of India on the basis of election results alone. There may be fractious in-laws and recalcitrant family folk who may muddy even the best script that a new leadership may put out. We have seen this before and may do so again, though I hope not. What makes the 16th general elections different from its predecessors? Do these departures reflect deeper social and economic changes? And how may these impact on India's future trajectory? The current elections will have seen the active participation of 150 million first-time and young voters, with 14% of them in the 18 to 19 year age group. They are both urban and rural, and thanks to mass media, their aspirations also have become similar. They wish to have better education and employment opportunities. They want a decisive leadership which can deliver both better governance and also rapidly developing economy. Oddly enough, though the Aam Aadmi phenomena has dissipated, I think, much of the cynicism concerning the kind of cynicism that was there in the Indian populace about the disabilities of the current political system and politicians in general. This particular change in sentiment is very important because this has brought about a sense of hope, a sense of anticipation which was perhaps not there before. And this is so even though the Aam Aadmi itself party has faltered since its early success. The extraordinary story of the rise of Narendra Modi was also a story of traditional politics and politicians no longer being an immutable reality. This is, in some sense, an outsider's election. And this is different. The high turnout, which in some states touched over 85%, is reflective of this new. This, of course, sets a very high bar for any incoming government, and failure to deliver on these expectations may spell an even more dramatic political debacle than the UPA too has had to contend with. The voting public wants everything they see lacking in the Congress-led government. The Finance Minister, Mr. Chidambaram, said it right recently, though somewhat belatedly, that his party had failed to recognize that in the past decade, a new aspirational India had emerged, very different from the old stereotype of what he called a petitioning, or what I call an entitlement habituated India. People, even the most remote and poorest corners of India, want empowerment and personal dignity, not entitlement through handouts. This election reflects the enormous change in India brought about as a result of rapid economic and social development, as well as the country's relentless, if sometimes reluctant, integration into the global economy. Another aspect of the same socio-economic transformation of India is how much modern technology has embedded itself into the country's political and social processes. This is, of course, most dramatically represented by the 3D hologram Modi giving darshan or audience to millions of his supporters in multiple locations simultaneously. But Google, Facebook, and Twitter have also become indispensable players in this election process, connecting candidates to voters, voters to voters, and pollsters to the public, all in real time. There are an estimated 200 million internet users, 100 million Facebook users, and 33 million Twitter accounts in India, and 1 billion mobile telephones, which are powerful platforms for communication. Mr. Modi has 3.6 million Twitter followers, and Mr. Kejriwal of the Aam Aadmi Party has over 1.5 million. No guesses for who are the majority using the social media. They are drawn from the same 150 million new and young first-time voters I referred to earlier. Indian elections are being deeply impacted by and are in turn impacting on the use of social media in ways that are not always very clear, beyond the print and electronic media, which had hitherto remained the staple of electioneering. If one should not trust pollsters, psephologists, and astrologers, can one say anything at all about the broad trends in these elections? There is no doubt that there is a widespread disappointment and frustration over the failure of UPA 2, in particular its failure on the governance and economic fronts. This will be a vote against the Congress, and it is likely that the party will record perhaps its lowest tally ever. Will the votes it will lose go mostly to the BJP? That is not entirely clear because of the many political parties in the fray and the continuing appeal of regional parties and the salience of local issues. The political arithmetic gets complicated once you begin to disaggregate to the constituency level, where vote share does not always align with the seat share, thanks to the first past the post system with several contending candidates in each constituency. While there is likely to be a significant vote swing in favor of BJP overall, its seat share may either see a smaller shift or on the contrary, a bigger shift in comparison. That uncertainty will remain until after the election results are announced. The coalition pattern, which has entrenched itself since at least 1996, will probably prevail, but whether the largest party leading it will have seats close enough to absolute majority will determine the scope for decisive action. A presidential style campaign may not necessarily yield a presidential style of government, irrespective of the personalities involved. The 16th general elections are giving India another chance of playing to win rather than playing it safe to a draw, as they say about Indian cricket today. At reaching out for the World Cup, not once or maybe twice, or twice to make you happy, but each and every time. Unique among the major emerging economies, India has a young, still growing and aspirational population, which could deliver a sustained and transformational growth punch if empowered through education and skills appropriate to a modern globalized economy. To be globally competitive and to begin to aspire to set standards of excellence for the rest of the world, India will need to unleash the creative and innovative energies of its younger generation, and that requires massive investment in human resource development, both in quantity as well as in quality. This, to my mind, is the overriding challenge for new government, whatever its persuasion will happen. India's aspirations must be directed also to a concept of prosperity and well-being very different from that which has defined Western societies and which drives China's own spectacular growth story today. In an increasingly resource and particularly energy-constrained world, which is under serious and growing threat of ecological degradation, current patterns of growth are no longer sustainable or even viable. I am sure that the dire predictions of the fifth assessment report of the IPCC are familiar to you. The resource and energy intensive, waste generating and ecologically unsustainable patterns of production and consumption that characterize advanced industrial societies are simply not viable for India and would soon become unviable even within the developed world. India is still at an early phase of its development trajectory, and much of its infrastructure remains to be built. It has development choices that other emerging economies may not have, and therefore there is an opportunity to build a globally competitive economy which generates material well-being and higher standards of living consistent with ecological sustainability. This is another strategic choice which will confront any political dispensation. India's democracy is an inspiring achievement. It has provided space for multiple identities and diverse religious and cultural expressions to flourish together within its fold in an increasingly globalized and shrinking world. This is the world where nations and societies will be successful if they are also successful in handling plurality and are comfortable in a cosmopolitan environment. Those which find comfort in shrinking the space around them, defined through increasingly narrow identities, are likely to wither and fail. The election campaign we have been witnessing in India asserts India's expansive inclusivity, and its young voters appear to have transcended the social and sectarian divides which have been a constant overlay on Indian politics. This, I believe, is a very encouraging trend, and I remain optimistic about India's future. Thank you for your attention.